Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back, everyone, to another class of this great book of Islam, the Shifa by Qadi Iyad, rahimahullah. Just a couple of administrative notes. Um, Again, I apologize for people that went to the mosque tonight, but the AC is still not working. So if you're at the mosque, the AC in the basement and the cafe is working, but not in the main hall. So it was easier for me just to come home and do the class from home. I apologize, but next week, inshallah, we'll resume in the mosque. The second thing is that we're on page 284. For those of you that are following in the book, we left off at the very bottom of page 284, and we are in section 1 of chapter 1, talking about the belief of the Prophet's heart, alayhi from the moment of his prophethood. So I'll pick up with the paragraph beginning, "This interpretation is confirmed by the hadith," etc. Okay. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Qadi Iyad, he says, rahimahullah, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. This interpretation is confirmed by the hadith which Sharik ibn Abdullah al-Nakhai related from Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Aqil from Jabir ibn Abdullah. When the idolaters gathered in the Dar al-Nadwa was this place in Mecca in which it was like a community center. People would get together and they would talk about community related issues. To discuss the Prophet, meaning that they were upset that he was, having this new message. So they were like, what do we do about this? When they gathered in Dar al-Nadwa to discuss the Prophet, ﷺ, and they agreed that they should say that he was a sorcerer. That was difficult for him to bear, and he wrapped himself in his garment and enshrouded himself in it. And then Jibreel ﷺ came to him and he said, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, and Ya ayyuhal muddathir, oh who are entrapped and enshrouded, etc. Or he might have feared that the gap was due. Here we are talking about the gap. When the Prophet ﷺ received the revelation in Hira, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, that incident, there was a gap of time until the next revelation came. So that's what he's discussing. Or he might have feared that the gap was due in some way to himself and thus feared that it was a punishment from his Lord. No rejection of this possibility has come which would cause it to be objected to. There is something similar in the case of the flight of Yunus alayhi salam, when he feared that his people would call him a liar regarding the punishment with which he had threatened them. Allah Ta'ala says about Yunus alayhi salam, he thought that we would have no power over him, meaning we would not constrict him. Mekki said that he described the mercy of Allah Ta'ala and hoped that he would not make it difficult for him when he left. It was said that he had the good opinion of his Lord, that he would not exact punishment from him. It is said what it means, we will give others power over him. It is said that it means we will punish him for his anger and departure. Abdul Rahman ibn Zayd said that it means that he think that we would not have power over him. It is not fitting to think that a prophet would be ignorant of one of his Lord's attributes. It is the same when he says when he went out in anger. In other words, he's trying to explain what these problematic verses might mean, because they can't mean that the Prophet didn't obey Allah Ta'ala or was mad or something like that. The sound position is that he was angry with his people because of their here he's talking about Yunus alayhi salam. He was angry with his people because of their disbelief, as Ibn Abbas ad-Dahhak and others stated. His anger was not directed at his Lord, since anger at Allah amounts to opposition to him. Opposition to Allah Ta'ala is disbelief. It is not proper for the believers, so how would it be proper for the prophets? It is said that he was afraid his people would call him a liar or kill him. It is also said that he was angry at one of the kings when he commanded his people to revert to a matter which Allah Ta'ala had commanded on the tongue of a previous prophet. Yunus alayhi salam said to him, do you think that another has better standing with him than me? But the king was determined to do it, so he left in anger because of that. It is related from Ibn Abbas that Yunus alayhi salam's mission and prophethood took place after the fish had cast him out. For proof, he took the verse, we cast him into the wilderness and he was sick, and we made a tree of gourds grow over him, and we sent him to 100,000 or more. He also used as proof Allah Ta'ala's words, do not be like the man of the fish, which Allah Ta'ala follows with, his Lord chose him and made him from his righteousness. Therefore, indicating this story happened before he became a prophet. That interpretation is a little problematic. I mean, it's logical given the chronology of the verse, but that interpretation is problematic for the following reason, which is the question is, are the prophets infallible before they are commissioned as a prophet? And the large body of evidence would indicate that yes, that the prophets alayhim as-salam are ma'sumun, they are infallible from the moment of their birth. And that's one of the things that he's trying to get across in this book, is that the Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad, that is alayhi salam, is an example for us, even when from the moment he was born, that Allah Ta'ala protected him. I mean, I'm not going to belabor that point because I don't want to take us off course, but I just want to highlight that the interpretation that he's putting here, it could be deemed problematic for that reason. If you were to ask about the meaning of the Prophet's words, alayhi salam, this is now Sayyidina Muhammad, alayhi salam, my heart becomes rusted over. Innahu la yughanu ala qalbi. My heart becomes rusted over so that I ask forgiveness of Allah 100 times a day. And as we said elsewhere, he said in another narration, 70 times a day. Beware lest you should think that this rusting over implies whispering or doubt coming into his heart. According to Abu Ubaid, the meaning of rust in this sense is what covers the hearts. Its root is the layers of clouds that cover the sky. Another said that the rust is something which covers the hearts but not completely, like fine mist in the air which does not stop the light of the sun from coming through. Now, this hadith is important because it is on its face value a problematic hadith. What does it mean that the Prophet ﷺ, his heart becomes cloudy? This occurred to one of the great saints of Islam, Abu Hassan al-Shadhili, who comes several generations after Qadi Iyad. So unfortunately, Qadi Iyad did not obviously include it in the book because it happens to somebody that was born a couple centuries after him. Abu Hassan al-Shadhili was thinking about this. What does that mean, that the heart of the Prophet ﷺ is clouded? And then he heard a voice say, clouds of light, not clouds of darkness. So one of the ways of looking at this hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ is always in a state of ascent, always in a state of becoming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not like he's stagnant and he's the same. No, he's always increasing. So every moment of increase, he looks at the moment before and he sees how closer he is now. So he says, astaghfirullah, which is a completely different meaning than what it would mean for us, that no, we sin and that our hearts become dark. So I wanted to offer that because you're not going to find it in the book because of the chronology of the author. Similarly, it is said to be understood from this hadith that his heart was covered 100 times or more than 70 times a day, since the expression used in most of the transmissions does not necessarily mean that. The number refers to the prayer for forgiveness, not to rusting over. The term rusting over, meaning that in this interpretation, he's saying the Prophet ﷺ says astaghfirullah 100 times, not that his heart is covered 100 times. The number refers to the prayer for forgiveness, not the rusting over. The term rusting over may indicate heedlessness of the heart, lapses of the self, or forgetting the constant remembrance and contemplation of Allah Ta'ala. This was forced on the Prophet ﷺ by his having to contend with men. So here he's getting the same meaning, that the Prophet ﷺ couldn't always make dhikr non-stop because he had to deal with people. But that also is a problematic interpretation, because that would mean that the Prophet ﷺ was not mindful of Allah at a moment, which is an impossibility. The Prophet ﷺ was always mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was forced on the Prophet ﷺ by his having to contend with men, community politics, family preoccupations, meeting both friends and enemies, the needs of the self, and the burdensome responsibility of carrying out the message and bearing the trust. In all of this, he was obeying his Lord and worshipping his Creator. However, because the Prophet ﷺ is the highest of creation with Allah, the most elevated in degree, the most complete in gnosis, and his state is purity of heart, freedom from anxiety, isolation with his Lord, and turning to him with all of himself, And because his station with Allah is the higher of the two states, the Prophet ﷺ was able to see when he was absent from this exhausted state and preoccupied with other things. He saw this as a failing away from his sublime state and high station, and therefore asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him. This is the most fitting interpretation of the hadith and the best known one, which is a long-winded way of saying what a couple of centuries later Abu Hassan al-Shadili radiallahu anhu will say, which is a very sound, and that's the way I understood the hadith, how I was taught and how I teach it. Many people have inclined to this interpretation, skirting it without completely encompassing all its implications. We have approached its hidden meanings and unveiled it for those who seek benefit from it. It is based on the fact that lapses, inattention, and forgetfulness in things other than the path of conveying the message are permissible for the Prophet ﷺ, as we will show. A group of the masters of the hearts and sheikhs of tasawwuf believe that the Prophet ﷺ was altogether free of this. And this is what I hold. Okay, this is my belief in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the Prophet ﷺ was altogether free from this and too sublime for any forgetfulness or lapses, so that for them the hadith refers to the business of this community which worried and saddened him due to his concern for his people and his great compassion for them. He therefore asked for forgiveness for them. They said that the rusting over of the heart could in this instance be the sakina covering it, as indicated by Allah Ta'ala's words. Allah sent down his sakina on him. His asking forgiveness is to display the slavehood and the need. Ibn Ata said, his asking forgiveness is to inform his community that they must ask for forgiveness. Someone else said that it was to tell them to be continually caution and not to rely solely on trust. Just 1 second, I want to look something up really quickly. $656. Yeah. So Qadi Iyad died in 544, and then Abu Hassan al-Shadili died in 656. Okay. It is possible that this rusting over is a state of fear and awe which covered his heart and caused him to ask forgiveness out of thankfulness to Allah Ta'ala and clinging to his slavehood, as indicated when he said, should I not be a thankful slave? Relating to this last possibility, some variants of the hadith say, my heart is covered more than 70 times a day, so I seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might ask the meaning of Allah Ta'ala's words to the Prophet ﷺ, if Allah wished, he would have gathered them all to guidance, do not be amongst the ignorant. And words of Allah Ta'ala to Nuh ﷺ, do not ask for what you do not have any knowledge of. I warn you that you will not be one of the ignorant. So, excuse me, these verses, it's like, well, is Allah upset with the prophets ﷺ for talking like this? That's the question that he now wants to deal with. Know that you should not pay any attention to the statements of those who say that the verses regarding the Prophet ﷺ means do not be amongst those who are in ignorance. If Allah had willed, he would have gathered them to guidance. And that the verse regarding Nuh, when the Prophet ﷺ says, do not be amongst those who are ignorant, that the promise is true, when he said your promise is true. Don't think that it means do not be amongst those who are ignorant, that Allah's promise is true. If this were the case, it would imply the ignorance of Allah's qualities, and this is a quality which the prophets are not permitted to have. What is meant here is a warning that they should not take on the hallmarks of the ignorant in their affairs. It is as if Allah were saying, I warn you. There is no proof in any verse that the prophets ﷺ have any quality which they are forbidden to have. But how can that be true, you ask, when the verse regarding Nuh says, do not ask about what you do not have knowledge of? It is better to apply that verse to what comes after it, to what comes before it, because such asking needs permission. It was permitted to ask about it at the beginning, but when Allah Ta'ala forbade Nuh to ask about what was concealed and hidden from him in the unseen, regarding why his son had to be destroyed. Then Allah Ta'ala perfected his blessing on Nuh by informing him why that was the case when he said, "He is not one of your family, it is not a right action." Similarly, our Prophet ﷺ was commanded in another verse to cling to patience in the face of his people's opposition and not to be so distressed by it that he approached the state of the ignorant in the intensity of his grief. Abu Bakr ibn Fawrak related this interpretation. It is said that the speech is to the community of Muhammad ﷺ and means that they should not be amongst the ignorant. Abu Muhammad Makki said, there are many verses like this in the Quran. This clearly shows that the prophets ﷺ must necessarily be protected from ignorance after the commencement of their prophethood. If they were to say that if their protection from this defect is confirmed and it is not permissible for them to have any such thing, then what is the meaning of Allah Ta'ala's threat to our Prophet ﷺ when he did what he did and was cautioned about it? The answer is that it is the same as when Allah Ta'ala says, "It has been revealed to you and to those before you, if you associate others with Allah, your actions will come nothing and you will be amongst the losers." Also, the verse, "Do not call on what will neither help you nor harm you apart from Allah. If you do that, you will be amongst the wrongdoers." Allah Ta'ala also says, "Then we would make you taste the double of life and the double of death, and you would have found none to help you against it." Allah Ta'ala also says, "We would have seized him by the right hand." Also the verse, "If you obey most of those on earth, they will misguide you from the way of Allah. They only follow supposition, conjecturing." Allah Ta'ala also says, "Or do they say he has forged a lie against Allah? Had Allah willed, he would have sealed your heart. And Allah eradicates the false and verifies the truth by his words. He has knowledge of the thoughts in the breasts." Also the verse of Allah, "O Messenger, convey that which has been sent down to you from your Lord. If you do not do it, you have not conveyed his message. Allah will protect you from men. Allah does not guide the people who disbelieve. And lastly, fear Allah and do not obey the unbelievers and the hypocrites." Know, may Allah grant you and us success, that it is not valid or permissible for the Prophet not to convey the message or to oppose his Lord's command. The Prophet cannot associate anything with Allah Ta'ala, nor say things about him which would not be said, nor forge lies against him, nor misguide anyone. His heart is not sealed and he does not obey the unbelievers. However, Allah Ta'ala made his affair easy by clarifying what he conveyed to his opponents. If the Prophet ﷺ had not conveyed it in this way, it would be as if he had not conveyed it at all. He was comforted and his heart strengthened when Allah Ta'ala says, "Allah will protect you from the people." So that's like a concluding thought, that the Prophet cannot not give the message or cannot disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or else he wouldn't be a prophet. This is the same as when Allah Ta'ala said to Musa and Harun alayhim as-salam, "Do not fear," to strengthen their insight in conveying and making manifest the deen of Allah Ta'ala and to remove fear of the enemy which would weaken them. As for Allah Ta'ala's words, if he had made up any sayings and ascribed them to us, we would have seized him by force, and then we would have made you taste double punishments in life. It means that this would be the repayment of someone who did that, and it would have been repayment if he had been one of those who had done it, but of course he did not do it. In the same vein, Allah Ta'ala says, "If you obey many of who are in earth, they will misguide you from the way of Allah Ta'ala." Who is being referred to here is other than him, meaning other than the Prophet ﷺ, as in Allah Ta'ala's words, "If you obey those who reject," and when Allah Ta'ala says, "If Allah had willed, he would have sealed your heart," and Allah Ta'ala's verse, "If you associate, your actions will fail," and similar verses. The one who is meant in these verses is someone other than the Prophet ﷺ, and it is the state of the person who associates that is being talked about. This is not permissible for the Prophet ﷺ. Allah Ta'ala says, "Fear Allah and do not obey the unbelievers." It does not say that he did obey them. Allah Ta'ala was forbidding him to do what they wanted and commanding him to do what he wanted, as in Allah Ta'ala's words, "Do not drive away those who call on their Lord." The Prophet ﷺ did not drive them away, and he was not one of the wrongdoers. Okay, so this concludes that section, section 1. Just to remind us, this was the section about concerning the belief of the Prophet's heart from the moment of his prophethood. Okay, so there's basically what we're saying is that there is no way that the Prophet ﷺ, didn't believe in Allah or associated with Allah or misinterpreted the verses or didn't convey the verse. All of that stuff is just, it is not possible. It goes against what the very definition of prophecy is. Okay, the next section, it's a little bit long, so I think I'm going to have to, maybe I'll just do a little bit of it. Section 2, the protection of the prophets, plural, from defects before prophethood. Okay, this is what I was saying about my belief. I firmly believe that they are protected from birth. And he will give us some of these concepts. People disagree about whether the prophets, all of them, plural, alayhim as-salam, were protected from defects and that sort of thing before they were prophets, meaning before they were commissioned, before they received revelation. The correct position is that even before they were prophets, alayhim as-salam, they were protected from ignorance about Allah and his attributes and from any doubt concerning these things. So that statement automatically means that sequence of verses in the Quran about Ibrahim alayhi salam, he sees the stars, oh, that's my Lord. And then the stars, the moon, oh, the moon, that's my Lord. Oh, no, the sun, that's doesn't mean that he was like searching for belief and had false beliefs before he found Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not what that means at all, because that's impossible. It's impossible that any of the prophets were not monotheists, were not believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala their entire lives. So therefore it must mean something else. So one of the interpretations of that sequence of verses is that Ibrahim alayhi salam is showing his people the inconsistency and the incoherence of their belief. Like, why would you worship the stars or the moon or the sun if they set? And as a matter of fact, Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he uses that sequence of verses to deduce all of the rules of logic. I think his book is Al-Qistas al-Mustaqim. It's a small book of Imam I don't know if it's translated, but Imam al-Ghazali's book, Al-Qistas al-Mustaqim, he derives all of the rules of logic from that sequence of verses of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. Okay, returning to the text. The traditions and reports from the prophets alayhim as-salam support each other regarding the fact that they did not have any imperfection in this respect, from the time they were born, and that they grew up with tawheed and belief. The lights of gnosis and subtle breezes of happiness from the unseen rose up in them naturally, as we have noted in part 1 of this book. None of the traditionalists transmitted that anyone who has chosen and made a prophet has ever known to have been subject to disbelief or idol worship before he was a prophet. The documentation of this matter is all based on actual transmission. Okay, so there's no shred of evidence, as we would say in English. There's no transmission, there's no tradition that has a chain of transmission that says other than what we're saying here regarding any of the Anbiya. All of the prophets, alayhim as-salam, those that we know their names and those that we don't know their names, from the moment they were born to the moment they died, they had pure belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our belief in the prophets. Otherwise, to say otherwise would be to chip away at the armor of infallibility of the Anbiya. If you had another belief that like other religions do, then the whole edifice of prophecy will just crumble, because then you could introduce any kind of doubt. That's why our belief in the prophets is, I would go as far as to say very confidently, is the most coherent and the most consistent of beliefs in the prophets for those reasons. Okay, returning to the book. Some people have concluded that some hearts are naturally averse to someone who is like this. The Quraysh attacked the Prophet, our Prophet ﷺ, with all of their fabrications, and the unbelievers insulted the previous prophets in any way they could and invented things which Allah Ta'ala has reported or authorities have transmitted. In all of this, we nowhere find any reproach directed at any prophet by the unbelievers for rejecting their gods after having believed in them, or chiding them from leaving what he had previously joined them in doing. So none of the prophets, all of them, including Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, were ever accused by their people of, you used to believe in the gods that we believed in, now you don't. Okay, that's never happened. They've always been against them. That's what he's saying. If this had been the case, they would have censured their prophet alayhi for denying what he had worshipped before. That would have been more decisive as an argument than criticizing him for ordering them to leave their gods and what their fathers were worshipping before. That none of them did this is a proof that they could not find any way to do so, since if the prophets had done such things, it would have been transmitted. They would not have been silent about it, just as they were not silent about the change of the Qibla. When Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, what has turned them from their Qibla which they used to face? Qadi al-Qushayri found a proof of the prophets being free of this in the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we took a contract from the prophets and you and from Nuh and Ibrahim and Moses and Jesus son of Mary, we took a solemn contract from them. And the verse, when Allah Ta'ala took the contract of the prophets, now that we have given you a share of the book and wisdom, and then a messenger comes to you confirming what is with you, you must have faith in him and help him. He maintained that Allah Ta'ala purified the Prophet ﷺ in his contract. In this contract, it is extremely unlikely that a contract would be taken from him before he was created. Allah Ta'ala took this compact from all of the other prophets to believe in the Prophet ﷺ and help him many eons before his physical birth. The Prophet ﷺ being subject to idol worship or any other wrong actions is therefore only deemed permissible by a heretic. This is what Al-Qushayri means. How could such a thing be when Jibreel had come to him and split open his heart when he was young, brought out a spot from it and said, this is the portion of Satan in you. Then he washed his heart and filled with wisdom and belief as traditions and demonstrated. So what Imam al-Qushayri is saying is the following. These verses in the Quran, chapter 33, verse 7, and chapter 3, verse 80, Shanaz, we're on page 290. When Allah Ta'ala says we took a covenant, when we took a contract from the prophets and from you and from Nuh, Ibrahim, Moses, Jesus, son of Mary, we took a solemn compact from them, meaning that Allah Ta'ala made a contract with the prophets concerning Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ before Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ was even born. That's our belief. So Imam al-Qushayri is saying, how is it possible that Allah Ta'ala would make a covenant with these prophets about the last of prophets that is yet to come, and that last of prophets that yet to come was a polytheist before he became a prophet? Doesn't make any sense, right? And that's a very, very clever, very, very insight in these verses, and I'm glad that it's included in the book. There is no confusion, returning to the text now, there is no confusion concerning what Ibrahim alayhi said about the sun, the moon, and the stars when he said, this is my Lord. That's what I was saying in the beginning of this section. It is said that this happened when he was a child and began to look and seek for proof before the age of obligation. I don't accept that interpretation. Most intelligent scholars and commentators believe that he said what he said to rebuke and inform his people. That's the interpretation that I believe. It is also said that it is a question eliciting negation. So in fact, it means, how could this be my Lord? Which is another valid interpretation. He's like, how could this be my Lord if the stars set? And then the moon, how can the moon be my Lord if the sun rises and the moon sets? How can the sun be my Lord? You can interpret it as in the negative form. As the judge said, this is my Lord, Hada Rabbi, in the verses about Sayyidina Ibrahim ﷺ, means according to what his people used to say. In the same way as Allah Ta'ala says, where are my partners? So Allah Ta'ala says, where are my partners? Well, there are no partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he's using the language of the disbelievers. That is, according to the idolaters' claims. This indicates that Ibrahim ﷺ did not worship any of these things he mentioned and never associated anything at all with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala also says, when he said to his father and his people, what do you worship? Then he continues, have you considered what you worship, you and your fathers, the elders? They are an enemy to me except for the Lord of the worlds. Allah Ta'ala says of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he came to his Lord with a sound heart, that is free from idol worship. And he mentions the words of Ibrahim alayhi salam, turn me and my sons away from serving the idols, which was part of my message on the Eid al-Adha khutbah. One might also question the meaning of the words of Ibrahim alayhi salam, if my Lord does not help me, I will be amongst the misguided people. It is said that it means, if he does not confirm me with his help, I will be like you in your misguidance and false worship. It reflects his cautiousness and concern. In any case, he was protected from misguidance from before the beginning of time. One might also ask the meaning of Allah Ta'ala's words. Those who reject said to their messengers, we will drive you out of your land, or you will return to our religion. And then the later messenger's words, we would be forging lies against Allah if we were to return to your religion after Allah Ta'ala has saved us from it. Do not let the expression return cause you any doubts, thinking that it means that there is any notion of their going back to the religion of their people. When this word is used in Arabic, it does not necessarily mean something reverting to its original state. Thus, it says in the hadith about the people of Jahannam, they return to darkness, although they were not in darkness in the first place. It is like the poet who says, such noble qualities, not two bowlfuls of milk mingled with water, which later returns to urine. Meaning that after you drink it, you pee it out. Sorry to be graphic. So he's saying it wasn't urine, and then before. So it's an expression. It's a turn of phrase in the Arabic language. If you were to ask the meaning of Allah Ta'ala's words, He found you misguided and guided you. وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. The answer is that it is not the kind of misguidance which implies disbelief. And we talked about this in the last class, if I'm not mistaken. At-Tabari said that it refers to misguidance from the prophethood to which which Allah Ta'ala guided him. So meaning you were not commissioned as a prophet before Allah commissioned you as a prophet. That's one of the meanings of the verses. As-Suddi and others said that Allah Ta'ala found him amongst the people of misguidance, protected him from it, and guided him to belief and right guidance. It is said that the Prophet ﷺ was misguided from his Sharia. That is, he did not know it because it hadn't been revealed yet to him. Misguidance in this case means bewilderment. This is why the Prophet ﷺ retreated to the cave of Hira to seek what would enable him to return to his Lord and give him a Sharia, and then Allah Ta'ala guided him to Islam, as Al-Khushayri said. It is said that it means you did not recognize the truth, so He guided you to it. This is what Allah Ta'ala means when He says He taught you what you did not know, according to Ali ibn Isa al-Rumani. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma said that he did not have the kind of misguidance which constitutes an act of rebellion. It is said that it means that Allah Ta'ala made the matter clear to him by clear proofs. It is said that He found him misguided between Mecca and Medina and guided him to Medina. It is said that He found him and guided him, it is said that He found him and guided the misguided by him. All of these interpretations to make it clear that it does not mean that you are a disbeliever and then you have become a believer. Ja'far ibn Muhammad said Allah Ta'ala found him misguided from the love Allah Ta'ala had borne for him before time began. That is, that the Prophet ﷺ did not recognize it and that Allah gave him recognition of it. So, which is a beautiful interpretation. Al-Hasan ibn Ali alayhim as-salam recited it as one misguided found you and was guided by you. Ibn Atta said he found you misguided means longing for Allah Ta'ala's recognition. The misguided can mean the lover, as indicated by Allah Ta'ala's words describing Yaqub, you are in your old misguidance. That is your old love. When they told Yaqub that they were blaming him for wanting to continue to find Yusuf alayhi salam, إِنَّكَ لَفِي ضَلَالِكَ الْمُبِينَ. You are in your old misguidance, but meaning that your love of him is just old and long. They definitely were not referring to his deen. If they had said that about the Prophet of Allah, they would have been unbelievers. This is like when Allah Ta'ala says, we see you are in clear misguidance, i.e. clearly in love. Al-Junayd said that it means that Allah Ta'ala found him bewildered regarding the exact meaning of what had been sent down to him. So Allah Ta'ala guided him to it, saying, we sent down the remembrance to you. It is said it means that Allah Ta'ala found him when no one else recognized his prophethood, and that Allah Ta'ala helped him and guided the fortunate by him. I'm going to go to the end of the section, by the way, because I'm almost done. I do not know of any commentator who has said that it means that he was misguided from belief. The same thing occurs in the story of Musa alayhi salam, when Allah Ta'ala says, I did it then, being one of the misguided, meaning when he pushed the Egyptian away from the Hebrew. Meaning, according to Ibn Arafah, one of those in error who did something unintentionally. So Musa alayhi salam was very strong, so he unintentionally killed the Egyptian. Abu Mansur al-Azhari said that it means amongst the forgetful, as when Allah Ta'ala says, we found you misguided and guided you, meaning forgetful, as in the words of Allah, if one of them becomes misguided. If you ask for the meaning of Allah Ta'ala's words, you did not know what the book was or belief. As-Samarqandi said that this refers to the time before the revelation when the Prophet did not know how to recite the Quran or how to call creation to belief. Qadi Abu Bakr al-Baqillani, who's one of the great theologians of the Ash'ari school, said that it does not mean the belief which is obligatory. He went on to say that the Prophet ﷺ always believed in Allah's oneness, but when the obligations were sent down, which he did not previously know, and by which he was increased in belief, this is the best meaning. If you were to ask about Allah's words before that you were one of the heedless, mean then know, I think there's a misprint here, then know that this does not mean the same as the verse, those who are heedless of our signs. Abu Abdullah al-Harawi related that it means heedless of the story of Yusuf, since he had only learned it by relation. It is like when Uthman ibn Abi Shayba related from Jabir that the Prophet ﷺ used to be present when the idolaters at the religious assemblies. He heard two of the angels behind him, and one said to the other, go and stand behind him. The other replied, how can I stand behind him when he is told to touch the idols? So he did not attend with them ever again. That narration I need to verify, but I do not think it is sound. Ahmad ibn Hanbal disliked, oh, subhanAllah. When Allah gives you a moment of grace, alhamdulillah, you say alhamdulillah. There was something in my heart when I read that translation. That doesn't sound like a sound story. And then subhanAllah, the next line. Ahmad ibn Hanbal disliked this hadith and said that it is fabricated. Ad-Daraqutni said that its chain of transmission is weak. The hadith is generally disliked and there's no disagreement about the weakness of its chain. One does not use it. To which, of course, you would say, well, why Qadi Iyad did you include it, right? Well, because this is a book that is very thorough and he's very honest. And if there is a tradition out there somewhere in the books that would mean something other than what we're saying, we want to include it so we can teach people. So there is no time at all that the Prophet ﷺ attended any gatherings of idolatry or where the idols were there, other than when he was like just around the Kaaba because the idols were at the Kaaba, but that's a different situation. What is known about the Prophet ﷺ is different from this according to the people of knowledge. He said, the idols were made hateful to me, meaning Allah Ta'ala made it naturally hateful in his heart. Ayman related that once the Prophet's uncle and his family told him to attend one of their festivals, and they were intent on his going in spite of his hatred for it. He went with them and returned in terror. He said, whenever I draw near an idol, someone tall and white appeared to me shouting, go get back, do not touch it. He did not attend any of their festivals after that. And that's what I was referring to. And the other narration is that he fell asleep before he got there. So there's nothing that he naturally hated more than the idols. And that's what I was trying to talk about on the khutbah of Eid, by the way. You know, the idols. In these stories, they're actually like physical stone idols, but we have idols in our life that we just need to discard because we should only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is what is related about him in the story of Bahira, who asked him to make an oath by Allat and Al-Uzza. This was the caravan that was going to Syria when the Prophet was young, and Bahira saw that the cloud, the Prophet was walking and there was a cloud that was covering him. And he's like, oh, there's something. And then he sat by the tree, and Bahira said, only a prophet sits under that tree. So he starts to ask him. So he went to him and he said, I ask you by Alat and Al-Uzza. He's testing him. When he met him in Syria on a journey with his uncle Abu Talib when he was a child, Bahira had seen some of the signs of prophet in him and was testing him by asking this. The Prophet said, do not ask me by these two. So Bahira started, I ask you by Alat and Al-Uzza. And the Prophet said, do not ask me. I don't want to hear those names. I don't want to hear those names at all. Do not ask me by those two. By Allah, nothing is more hateful to me than those two. So Bahira said to him, by Allah, I ask you, I was only testing you when I asked you by them. And he said, ask what you like. And this is a famous story of the Prophet. It is known from his seerah that Allah Ta'ala gave the Prophet ﷺ success before his prophethood in opposing the idolaters in their stopping at Muzdalifah during the Hajj. He used to stop at Arafah because it was the stopping place of Ibrahim. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So we'll stop here, inshallah. I know some of you joined late. Apologize for the mix-up today again with problems with the AC. Inshallah, it's being rectified as we speak. It was just way too hot in the mosque. I was just there for me to conduct the class. So I decided just to come home and do it online. Are there any questions that people have? What section? We just finished. If you have the book, okay, we are on page 293. We've just finished section 2. We will be next week, inshallah, we'll begin section 3, the Prophet's knowledge of the affairs of this world. And we're making decent progress. It's hard at this point to say exactly when we'll finish, but I'm thinking by Thanksgiving, Christmas. We have 140 pages left. Maybe by Thanksgiving, inshallah. Any questions? Okay. Can you explain this part again? Misguided as in love. Well, when you're in love, you go crazy, right? Because you just do crazy things and you it's irrational. I mean, when you fall in love, it's amazing, right? It's a beautiful thing, but then you can do crazy things and people go without eating and without sleeping and without showering and it can drive you insane. So you need to be guided rationally. So like when our children come to us and they're interested in somebody, we're happy for them, but we also try to guide them. We try to put them on the right path so they don't make a mistake. So it's sort of, you can think of it in that sense. Or I want to love, but I don't know how to love. So that's where the misguidance is. So here, the Prophet ﷺ was longing to establish an intimate relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which can only happen through Islam, through the Sharia, its outward and its inward parts. So that became the guidance, the revelation became the guidance. So that's another way of looking at it. As a matter of fact, I just finished reading a fantastic book on love. It's too far away for me to grab. It's called A Thinking Person's Guide to Love by Prince Ghazi bin Muhammad, who is the cousin of the current Jordanian king, also the person that I work for and with. It's a long book. It's about 600 pages, but it's a very, very wonderful read. I highly, highly recommend the book, A Thinking Person's Guide to Love. Actually, I told him, he gave me the book a couple of weeks ago, and I started reading and I said, I would love to interview you about the book. So he agreed, but I got to set that up and, his schedules and all of that. But it's a fantastic book. I never knew the intricacies of love until I read some of the parts of that book. A Thinking Person's Guide to Love. Brother Muslim is asking me to give just summary of the key points that we covered, which is basically the two main points. Is the first point is that it's impossible for the Prophet, Sayyidina Muhammad, that is, or any prophet for that matter, those that we know about, those that we don't know about, to have not believed in all of what Allah Ta'ala gave them, or to have not conveyed the message that they were meant to convey. And that's one message. The second message is that the prophets are protected from birth, protected in the belief, that is. I mean, they're humans. They can get sick and they can get tired, and they go to sleep and stuff like that. But they are protected from disbelief. Those are the two main topics that we talked about. What used bookstore do you recommend? There's one off of Rockville Pike called Wonder Books. That's the one that I go to. I know there's another one in Rockville called Second Story Book. I have not been to that one yet. I think I drove by it once, but I haven't been there. But Wonder Books, which is by the Zemzem Market, for those of you who know Zemzem, that's the one that I go to. And I've just been going to it for so long. I know how the bookstore works, and every time I need to declutter my books, I take a couple of boxes and I sell it to them. I get store credit, and I get, so that's the one I use. But the used bookstore that I go to, I don't go there to buy Islamic books. Obviously, there's a very, very limited religion section, and in the religion section, there's maybe only one shelf on Islam, and half the books on Islam are translations of the Quran. I go there for books about American history or American politics, Civil War history, World War I, World War II history, Vietnam, that kind of stuff, or the classics, the literature, classic literature from A to Z. That's what it's good for. So, I try to read literature as much as I can, and there are some authors, in school we read the Canterbury Tales for Geoffrey Chaucer, but I didn't read Chaucer's other stuff. So it'd be great. I can go there and I'll find cheap copies of that. That's what I go to. The author of the book I mentioned was His Royal Highness Prince Ghazi bin Muhammad. Ghazi bin Muhammad, A Thinking Person's Guide to Love. He actually has a series of books called A Thinking Person's Guide to, A Thinking Person's Guide to Islam, A Thinking Person's Guide to Happiness, A Thinking Person's Guide to, I think, Our Times. Maybe there's another one. And then this is the massive one, A Thinking Person's Guide to Love. Love is his major topic. It's what he did his senior thesis at Princeton at, and then both of his PhDs in Cambridge and Al-Azhar. Each of them are on love. So that's his area. He's an expert in philosophy and love and whatnot. It's on Amazon. Let me just 1 second. Oh, the one on Amazon is a Kindle. Huh. It's published by White Thread Press. Okay, well, you guys will have to give me the week. I mean, he gave me the book, so I didn't buy it from an online. Okay. Give me a week and I'll figure it out, inshallah. Do you mind recommending an Islamic book list? Okay. There is a website that that's part of the organization that I head in Jordan. I don't run the website directly, but I'm supposed to oversee the people that do. It's called QuranicThought.com. If you go to this website, on the navigation panel on the left, you will see 25 introductory books, and then below that 500 essential books. So if you look at the 25 introductory books, these are what we're advocating are 25 key books to help you understand Islam from A to Z. Some of them are translated. So the links are there to the associated pages. I would start with that. For those of you who want even more, then the link below that, the 500 books, will show you like the top 500 books of Islam throughout the different subject matters of Islam. That would be a good start. That's where I would that's what I would start if you wanted to read. I hesitate to give people recommendations about books to read because people have different interests. Some people are interested in history. Some people are more philosophically minded. Some people are interested in the spiritual aspects and tasawwuf. Some people are looking for books only on hadith, so on and so forth. So because of that, it's very hard for me to just give a blanket. This is as general as a recommendation of books I can give because these are universal important, but you need to know these 25 books if you want to understand Islam, is what we're saying. And I try through these courses, I call these the great books, so we did Imam al-Nawawi's 40 hadith collection. We did the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. We did the Shama'il of Imam al-Tirmidhi. We did Imam al-Ghazali's Arba'in for Usul al-Din. Now we're doing the Shifa, and I have another book planned, another lengthy book planned after this, so on and so forth, because I'm trying to do that for you, provide you instruction on these are key essential books of Islam. Our entire edifice of our religion are based on these books. So that would be a list. However, what would help me in answering that question is if people tell me I'm interested in 1, 2, 3, what should I read? Then I can help you. But if people are like, what should I read in Islam? Well, read the Quran, right? I mean, that's kind of what I want to say, but I know that's not what people mean. Can you recommend books to someone heading to college? I would recommend Sayyid Hussein Nasr's what is it called? A Muslim guide to young Muslims. Let me see what the name of that book is. A Young Muslim's Guide to the Modern World by Sayyid Hussein Nasr. Professor Nasr, who, as you know, is my professor in university. I would also recommend Prince Ghazi's book, A Thinking Person's Guide to Islam. It's also very good and very easy to read. I would recommend my translation of the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah, which Imam al-Rifai, I think, is continuing leading the spiritual class on. Those are like one-line wisdoms. I mean, that would be, a line of wisdom a day kind of situation. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Some type of biography of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Those would be some of the recommendations that I have for people going off to college. Oh, I think Sarah found the book on White Thread Press. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. Wow, you guys are chatty today. Last class, no one asked anything. Alhamdulillah. Shipping is 27. 1 second. Let me grab the book. I want to just show you how big it is because I don't want people to I want you to be prepared for that. Just give me 1 second. So it's a big book, okay? It's not a small book. I mean, with all of the appendices and everything, it's 639 pages. But it's a fantastic, it's very light. It only took me like 4 or 5 days. Actually, that's not true. It took me a couple weeks to read it. But I could read like almost 100 pages at a time. So it's not heavy, but it's very, very rich in quoting of Aristotle and Plato and all of the great books of literature, Shakespeare, Jane Austen. So it's a lot of music references. So it's kind of like a light type of book. I'm sorry that the shipping is $27. I actually know the people at White Thread Press, so let me ask them if they have a workaround for American people, and maybe we'll get lucky and we can get like a box of 10 or something shipped to us, and I can pass them out or something like that. But this is the book that I was referencing, A Thinking Person's Guide to Love. I think somebody sent me a message question. Well, somebody asked me a personal question. I won't share that. But then somebody asked me a community related question. When did you realize the centrality of love of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? Actually, that's quite an easy question for me to answer because for me it was a very poignant moment. Um, all of my teachers, I think almost without exception, maybe like the exception of one or two, all of the teachers that I've ever studied with, they all studied with a great Moroccan scholar, Abdullah ibn Sadiq al-Ghumari. Abdullah ibn Sadiq al-Ghumari, rahimahullah, he died in 1993, I believe. Unfortunately, I never met him because I was too young and wasn't, Allah didn't give me the tawfiq of that. I've actually written a 40-page biography of him that I hope will be published soon. But he was um, a scholar, as they say, and his collected works that I have right here on my shelf are 19 volumes. So he was very, uh, you know, wrote a lot, and one of the things that he wrote, and because he was my teacher's teacher, I would always go to the bookstore like looking for his books to collect before the collected works came out. So one of those trips behind the Azhar, there are all of these like little bookshops. One of those trips I went and I found one of his books, and the name of the book is Al-Ahadith Al-Muntaqa fi Fada'il Sayyidina Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the 40 hadith in the exalted status of the Prophet Sallallahu. For those of you that remember when we were displaced and we went to the church for a year? I taught that book when we were in the church. Maybe you don't remember that, and maybe we'll teach it again. But I actually translated the hadith of the book. I haven't published it, but I translated it. And that reading of that book, for me, it's when it hit me, oh, love of the Prophet ﷺ is the basis of everything. It's the source of everything that we're doing. And it was a very moving moment for me. I actually taught that book also at the Adams Center. It was like the one and only time I was invited to teach something at Adams. I taught that over several weeks. And it was the way that the hadith that the sheikh selected and his commentary on the hadith and his detailed analysis of the text, of the hadith text. It hit me that, okay, I started seeing the love of the Prophet in everything that we were doing. So for me, that was like the moment that I realized how important this was. Any books on death that you recommend? One of my daughter's friends was asking, and the days of judgment. Yeah, Imam al-Ghazali's book on remembrance of death, which is a translation of the last book of Ihya Ulumuddin. It's also the last chapter in the book that we read together, the Arba'in for Usul ad-Din, which is Imam al-Ghazali's summary of the Ihya. But the last book of the Ihya is the remembrance of death. And that was one of the books I read in college. It was that and the managing the two desires. It was like the red book. Those are like the two translations that we had of the Ihya at the time, and those are the two books that I read. And I mean, the remembrance of death book scared the bejesus out of me in college. I mean, I had never realized like, oh man, life is short. We're gonna die. Got to get ready. So I highly recommend that book. Well, I'm happy that people are asking questions. Alhamdulillah. Um, I mean, whenever you ask me about books, I get excited because that's obviously important to me. Alhamdulillah, and I want to help inspire you the way I was inspired and the way I'm inspired when I read and I find a new author or a new book. And but I also hesitate to give recommendations because, like that book that I just mentioned about love of the Prophet, that book spoke to me. It might not speak to you. It just that was for me the moment to answer that question. It was reading that book that I understood. It doesn't necessarily mean if you read the book you're going to have the same impact. So when we do like the class setting, I like to stick to the great books, the books that are universally accepted and solid for that reason. Any other questions? Okay. Alhamdulillah. So we'll see. I guess we have a function at the mosque tomorrow, graduation function. Maybe I'll see some of you there. If not, we'll definitely, inshallah, next week we'll resume the class in person. Obviously, everything will always be on Zoom, but in person as well at the mosque for the remainder of the summer weeks, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك ذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.